Well, good morning everyone, and welcome to this Onward event on Getting Britain Working. It's all about embracing flexibility and security for the next generation of workers. I'm Lizzie Burden, I'm an economics and government correspondent at Bloomberg TV. I mainly cover the UK. And as an economics journalist, the main thing that has been on my mind recently is inflation, of course. And the tightness in the labour market is a key factor in that, so this is highly topical. Really, the tightness in the labour market is the only thing that the Bank of England can control. So for me, I want to unpack today how we can get around that by other means than the blunt tool of interest rate rises, which, as we know, only adds more pain for consumers. We also are going to discuss the broader challenges facing the UK labour market: automation, decarbonisation, how to make sure workers have the right skills, how to match those skills up to the vacancies that are available, how to make sure that we're spreading opportunities across the country evenly, and how to get hybrid working right. So without further ado, to address all of these issues, joining me we've got Chloe Smith, Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, also MP for Norwich North, has been since 2009. We've got Lee Purnell, who is founder of Petalite, which, if you don't know, is trying to change the game in electric vehicle charging. And we've got Monica Arino, who previously worked for BT and Ofcom and is now Director of Public Policy for the UK and Ireland at Amazon. So I'm sure we can cover a broad range of perspectives today. Thank you all so much for joining me. I am going to invite you all to give us some opening remarks, and then we're going to open the floor to questions after I sneak in a few of my own. So Chloe, if you'd like to kick us off.
I will, and thank you very much, Lizzie, for chairing us today, and thank you very much to Onward for putting this discussion on. I think there are some absolutely critical themes in what you set out for us today, and they are ones in which I would like to think that my department plays an absolutely central role. And this is a point I've been making indeed yesterday with lots of businesses visiting the conference, and also from the main stage, because as I see it, the challenge of our time in economic terms and in jobs terms is that we need to be able to help businesses to fill vacancies. And I, therefore, have an opportunity to help people who are currently unemployed or currently economically inactive, and we'll come on to talk about what those terms mean and some of the nuance beneath them, but to get people into work. And just to add the political element to this as well, I think this is critically important for us as Conservatives, because we believe that everybody should have the opportunity to be able to be in work and to have a chance at life. So when we talk about the next generation of workers, what do we want to see? Now, we can interpret that as young people. By all means, we can talk about youth unemployment, and there are various things to say about progress that we see there and further opportunities. And actually, I'm really looking forward to another chat as well later today with the Prince's Trust on this front, who do great work. And indeed, to see our new king, who's only just come into office, just like the rest of us. But this is a theme close to his heart. So actually, there is an important set of work there. But there is also, I think, a lot to do to think about what work looks like in the 21st century. And you talk about hybrid working, you talk about some of the things that will have become norms for some of us during the pandemic, and I really emphasise that some point, actually, because please let's not begin this debate thinking that everybody works from home. They don't. Factories carry on, blue-collar work carries on. Let's just get that one out there to start with. We're not all talking about hybrid working where everybody gets to sit nice and clean and tidy and quiet behind a computer. However, we do also have, I think, some other new characteristics coming into what work looks like nowadays. And the other real point that I'll put out there to get the debate started here is actually how people who perhaps haven't traditionally been in work now have every opportunity to do so and absolutely want to do so, and we shouldn't be writing them off. So in particular, I would just make a point about people with disability or health conditions. And disabled people, in decades gone by, might well have been subject to people thinking, well, that's fine, we can just take care of them, do protection, and work isn't an issue. That's tosh, absolute rubbish. And we should be able to, I think, in terms of flexibility, security, opportunity, and thinking about the next generation of the workplace and the workforce, we need to be able to include everybody's talents, and that's something I'd really like to hear the colleagues' views on the panel, and perhaps bring out as we talk. The health conditions part of that is also actually quite relevant, because there is a trend post-pandemic where you do see an increasing number of people who are economically inactive, in the sense of particularly older people, so sort of 50s through to mid-60s, who for various reasons have chosen not to come back to the workplace. Now that is a problem we need to solve, and when I say a problem we need to solve, I mean we need to support those people to be able to take the choice that is right for them. I want to be able to support them to be back in the workforce, because I want their talents involved, but also because, going back to my starting point, economic growth is blocked if we don't have a way to help businesses to fill their vacancies. And if I just put it in numbers terms before handing on to the next speaker, the key numbers in my role are that we have 1.5 million vacancies, we have 1 million people who are unemployed, traditional definition, and 9 million people who are inactive. And that is the triangle of numbers that means we need to think about things differently. We have an opportunity to do things differently in a way that will help individuals in a conservative way as well, and that will take us forward on growth, which you don't need me to repeat is a key focus of the government.
Okay, thank you, Chloe. Lee, do you want the next?
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm the private area. I would say you're at the bigger scale. I started my business 8 years ago. I would call ourselves a scale-up business now, well beyond startup. We do electric vehicle charging technology, so it's less of a rebranding exercise of existing tech. It's new, innovative research and development. We deal a lot with people like Innovate UK, UKRI, and then also TechNation and things like that. So we've got stuff under the hood that is world beating. So one of the big advantages that we're looking for is that we become a global exporter in the next 2 to 3 years. We're in a position where we have hyper amounts of scaling that we need to do in our business. We are investor backed, so private equity backed. Some of our biggest private equity investors are from the US, so some of the biggest private equity firms in the world. So we're ticking all the boxes when it comes to green, tech, scalar, kind of new green shoots, shall I say. But we also have a lot of challenges, especially in the UK workforce, about recruiting talent, maintaining talent, growing talent within. And that's reflected actually quite similarly to what we see with, for example, like the TechNation reports that have come out recently around tech businesses. So there's a disconnect where you've got 75% of people want senior roles in their business, but there's not like when you've got all these people, they're not all senior roles, right? So there's a big issue there where a lot of people who want to get retrained don't believe that that tech adds value to their business, which I find kind of surprising, but I've grown up in an environment where tech is a really important piece. So there's an education piece that I see that needs to happen in the general populace, that tech is a really good thing. A lot of the country could go full deep tech, like retrain as coders. Like in the grand scheme of things, we're only 31 million taxpayers in the UK. I think it's around that number, out of the global population of 9 billion. So if we all decided to go heavy deep tech, I think that could still work on a high level. Obviously, you still need manufacturing and stuff. One of the other things that we're dealing with is uncertainties in the market around, you've got Brexit, you've got all the market changes with what's happening in Europe right now, with global supply chains. So we've seen a strategic shift from people wanting to kind of build in China, build in Mexico, build in all these areas, to actually onshoring a lot of stuff. But then there's challenges around how do you do that, and how do you do it where you reduce risk, because unknowns, tax policy doesn't really affect businesses like us or investors. Like labour policy doesn't really affect us as much. I mean, you just plan it in, right? It's the unknowns that scare private external investors. So I like the idea that there's they're looking at the investment zones and all that's coming out. Obviously, let's see the detail. But I think it's good because it gives us the opportunity of onshoring several thousand jobs, and we can be a global exporter in 4 years. So it's a very rapid deployment. And then obviously we were going to talk a little bit about disability policies and stuff that go beyond. But that's me, and yeah, I look forward to speaking on the panel.
Thank you, Lee, and Monica.
Thank you, Lizzie, and good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you very much, Onward, for the invitation. And I've just said it, when I talk in panels like this, I don't have to introduce Amazon, the brand, and a lot of people, I think, buy through our website. But I'm really excited to be able to talk about our role as one of the largest employers in the UK, because that's not something that is often understood. And indeed, we are seen as a tech company, but over 70% of the 75,000 people we employ in the UK are in operations roles in our warehouses, for instance. So I'd love to talk a little bit about what we do, both in terms of kind of job numbers, but particularly the skilling and upskilling, and how we contribute to kind of social mobility in the UK through our employability programs. We've been in the UK for over 25 years. And at the moment we have 30 fulfillment centres, that's what we call our warehouses, as well as R&D sites in Edinburgh, London and Cambridge, and two corporate offices, one in London and one in Manchester. So we provide a whole variety of different jobs and different roles. And even within our warehouses, there are 60 different types of roles under one roof. So the types of jobs that we offer are really varied. But what I think we're very unique in, and again that's not often understood or recognized, is that we're an entry point for people that have not worked and that don't have necessarily prior skills. So 50% of the people that joined our operations last year were previously unemployed or came straight from education. So we're a route into employment. And then we put a lot of effort, and again 90% of the people that joined us told us that development was one of the reasons that they wanted to join. We put a lot of effort on developing people so that we can retain that talent. So we have fantastic, for instance, apprenticeships programs, created 1,500 apprentices this year, 1,000 last year, over 40 different schemes. So again, a very varied type of apprenticeship offer that we have, and also very different ages. I mean, we have a lot of people over 50 doing apprentices with us and retraining and upskilling in that sense. And we offer another program that I'm particularly proud of, actually, called Career Choice, which offers our employees up to 95% of the tuition and materials fees for nationally recognised courses over 4 years, paying £2,000 every year for them to retrain on anything they want, which then allows them to go on to kind of better jobs within Amazon or outside of Amazon. One of the most popular courses at the moment is HGV driving, so you can make a lot of money as an HGV driver, and we have 1,000 people training for that. I think through that program we've already or have over 10,000 people kind of retraining in different careers. So that's a sort of kind of broad picture. Something that we're exploring at the moment, and in response to a very tight labour market, but also a desire to do better for our employees, is tapping into kind of talents that is sometimes not kind of that easily available, and you know, that's by being more flexible in the workforce and providing support for people with specific needs. We have a fantastic veterans program, 2,500 people at the moment working for Amazon through that program, 300 spouses, and 200 of those this year. So it's a program that we kicked off in 2017 and has grown very rapidly. We have a care leavers program. It's a smaller one, but it's a really important one, and a signature of the Care Covenant as well, and we partner with Bernardo's. And we also are supporting people with disabilities as well in the workforce. And there's much more that we can do in that space, but I think there is more that employers can and should do to facilitate that flexibility and tap into a broader workforce. So that's a little bit kind of the broad brush. Very happy to go into some questions.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for that. Minister, I'm going to start with you. It's a huge question that's hanging over the conference today, I think. surrounds benefits and whether this government, to balance the books, is not going to raise benefits in line with inflation, but instead rise them in line with earnings, which I suppose you could argue would incentivise people to get into jobs. Not everyone would agree with that. It doesn't seem politically palatable in a cost of living crisis. Can you confirm once and for all that's the plan?
I'm glad you asked that question earlier, Lizzie, because it means that Chris and others can now go home and not cover the rest of the session. But taking the subject with the seriousness it deserves. On a pure process point, I'm not able to set out today what the ingredients of the decision are, because actually, as you will know, it requires data that is yet to come.
So why do pensioners get the certainty but people on benefits don't?
Indeed, you have observed that is what is there in the triple lock. But what I would say about the benefits uprating decision is that it shares a commonality actually with the pensions decision. Because actually what we need to do, of course, is first of all protect the most vulnerable, and I think that's critical. That's also very visible in the triple lock, because actually what that is about is the idea that pensioners are not typically able to work and change course and earn more at their stage of life. So that is why the triple lock is as it is. But that principle is also really important in the benefits uprating matrix. However, as you also mentioned work incentives, I do think it's fair to touch on that. What you will be seeing from this government in broad terms is wanting to be able to give people the incentive to go into work. Now this is there in the growth plan. You will have seen some of the measures that we say there about universal credit, and it's there in the rest of what my department does. What I'm going to say to you this morning about benefits uprating, and I'm not going to go into further questions on it, I'm afraid. What I'm going to say is what I'm going to say right here and right now, is that we want to be able to protect the most vulnerable, but also more broadly keep looking at work incentives.
So we don't have an answer yet.
Correct, for a good process reason that I've also just given.
Okay, I'm sure you'll probably get some questions from the audience on that. But Monica, I want to ask you, we've talked about labour shortages, we've talked about the impact on inflation. Are you facing labour shortages at Amazon, and what's causing them?
We are facing labour shortages. I think that's happening to lots of other employers. There has been a combination of factors that we have seen in the last few years. After Brexit and compounded by the pandemic, we saw a number of EU nationals leave. We've seen, and you've alluded to that, Chloe, people not returning to work or taking early retirement, and that's also sort of affecting us. And we also see at entry level a certain lack of skills, perhaps employability skills, some basic skills that need to be sort of tackled. So it is a combination of factors. What we're doing, as I alluded a little bit in my opening remarks, is just adapting and making sure that we are trying to attract, retain the talent that we do have. We offer good pay. We have used some hiring bonuses to attract people in particular areas of the country where we saw particular challenges. And when we sort of look where we operate and where we want to operate a new site, we do look at the kind of employability potential in the area. So we just kind of, I think, respond to those in the best way we can. And I have to say we work really well and really closely with DWP, Job Centre Plus, and make a lot of use of swaps and other programs that you have, and the partnerships with there have been really fantastic.
May I, just because you use the acronym, so SWAP is a sector-based work academy, which is actually a way that we try and help train individuals to be ready to go into specific sectors. It's a really good tool, and I'm really pleased you say that. Thank you.
It is. We use it a lot, and you know we have seen referrals through that. Sometimes sort of decrease, and it goes back to kind of what is the training that people need to get into the workforce now, and you know some literacy skills and some basic skills are a little bit missing, but those are fantastic programs, and I think we have definitely benefited from them.
And Lee, you mentioned that it's not just at the entry level, but at the upper levels that we're trying to retain talent, the upskilling challenge. From everything we've heard from the government in terms of its plans to grow the economy, are you confident that the policies are going to give the skills and investment your business needs to thrive?
There's going to be a mix. So we hired Kickstarters when the Kickstarter program was there. They still work for us, so we do upskill within the business. In the tech industry, I'll refer quite a lot to the West Midlands for this area. There are some really good programs that upskill people that, for example, never touched a keyboard or coded in their life, and within weeks they'll be trained up, and then they're able to go in at a graduate level or a beginner level. But then the numbers don't lie when it comes to senior level requirements, right? When you get money as a tech business, I mean, you're looking at 15 billion of investment last year alone in tech industries. Is like you need to hit the ground running, and so you're planning your short-term growth strategy, like I need to hit milestones as fast as possible. But then you're also then planning your medium and long term, so or your executives or your senior management. You can't really upskill those. Sometimes you can, but you tend not to be able to, and you have to kind of fight over them with other people. So there's a lot of kind of poaching that goes on within this industry. This is the point where I do think you hire from abroad is usually a really good one. We probably about 50% of our staff are from abroad, but we know that then that will get leveled out, right? So my CTO is from Greece, some of my heads of engineering are from Malaysia, but then that will balance. And I think that's really good, right? Because you're bringing in the skills that you need to bring in that you cannot find in the UK, or the price of that wage packet is so high that it does need to be tempered slightly. And it's a scale-up business, so you cannot be showing wage packets the likes of Jaguar Land Rover or Rolls-Royce. And so what we find as well is if it's a green tech business, especially in the tech industry, one of the key differentiators and the reasons why people join our business is because of that social element of actually making a difference. So that is making a significant impact when it comes to job decisions that we see in the tech industry. And I think it's number 2 of the decisions when it comes to that, of people where to pick their jobs. So money is there, yes, it's important, but making a difference actually is rising up the ranks when it comes to a decision in that market. So yeah, there's a challenge. There needs to be training internally. I think it's really good that people can train. Like I said before, the fact that Tech Nation identified that most people don't believe that actually training in tech will give you a better salary and a better cost of living life, and that's surprising. And so there's a bit of education there to go, look, you can double your salary really if you go into this area.
Minister, the government's reviewing public spending. Analysis by our economists at Bloomberg Economics suggests that to balance the books, to restore fiscal credibility, you're going to have to cut spending more deeply than in the austerity years. How then will you afford to pay for all these investment in skills, spending on infrastructure to grow the economy, and coming back to it, paying for benefit rises in line with inflation?
It's a really serious question and a very, very good question. And I think what you've seen in the plan for growth and in the way the Prime Minister has set out her vision is the knowledge actually of a kind of important truth in this area, which is that if we can achieve greater growth, then we have more jobs, we have higher wages, we have better opportunities for everybody. Now, that then begins to help us on all the points that you've just listed off there. For example, more people in work obviously means more people contributing to the tax take, obviously means more funds available for sustainably funded public services. That is the loop we want to see.
Ideally.
Of course, ideally. But what else are we in government for if we're not working for the very best that we possibly can be? We're going for growth because we want to have that outcome and we want to avert the opposite. That is exactly what we're doing. So of course it's ideally, but you can't criticise me for being a hard worker and an optimist on that front rather than seeking to endorse failure. What we also then need to do is to be able to use the resources of the government to help make that happen. Now, part of what you saw in the plan for growth was then also supply-side reforms, which, for example, the investment zones is one of those, but there's more in there as well. Now, those are ways in which I think it is quite right to seek to use government resources to then get that better outcome. and for the reasons that I've just set out, that's why we want to see that succeed. But also we want to be able to, also we know that we need to be able to use the workforce of the government actually to help in this endeavour as well. And the example I would give from my own department is what we call work coaches. So actually Job Centre Plus is, as you will probably know, one of the very biggest workforces in government. I mean, we absolutely are, the front face of government on every high street in the country. And what that means is we have people there who are helping job seekers every hour of every day. We know that the more we can do of that, the more support actually that we can give job seekers, and the more training, for example, with the Sector-Based Work Academy programmes, the more impact we can have. So that's what we're all about. We're about trying to help businesses fill vacancies, because that is exactly right for growth and for sustainable public finances because of the tax loop. But also we do that by supporting people into work and encouraging people to look at good jobs, and then more of those good jobs in the sense of also higher earnings and more hours. And that's a theme we might bring out in this panel as well, because in the Plan for Growth is a measure to help people increase their incomes by being able to take on more hours. And all of those things are part of the answer to the question, the big important question you put.
And Monica, one of the other things that the Chancellor said more reform is coming on is childcare. We don't have the details yet, but this is going to help a lot of working parents. What would you like to see? Is it something for government to do, or is it really more on employers?
Well, I can comment on what employers like us are and should do more of. And I alluded a little bit to it before. I think it is all about flexibility. We know there are a lot of people that might be able to work with us if we offer them more flexibility and jobs that fit their circumstances better. And that's something we're exploring very actively. Like now, hybrid working is presented as a wonderful thing, but as you said very rightly, not everybody is working from home or can work from home. But what we're doing in our operations, for example, is to try and develop and have pilots at the moment live in 4 sites where we provide employees guaranteed, for instance, 80 hours work a month, but they can choose when and how they do those works patterns, and they can also kind of cancel or change them at 24 hours notice. So that means that, for a working mother with 3 small children, and I'm one such mother, that I don't think I can necessarily say do what I'm about to say, but you can just a job that it's 9 to 5, Monday to Wednesday doesn't help necessarily with childcare, or something that is every day but every week doesn't help with half-term week or with a sick child. But you have that flexibility. You can bring into the workforce carers or working parents or others that might not necessarily go for those jobs. So it is this two-way flexibility where flexibility means what people want. And the other thing that we need to do, and we do a lot of that, is just listen to employees more. We have a lot of mechanisms that we use to listen to corporate as well as operations employees to understand what is it that they need, what is it that they would like to see, what does work from home or hybrid mean for them. I mean, it's great in some respects, but if you're thinking about development or training, that's very much better done in person, right? And depending on your life stage, if you're younger or older, again, you might want different things. So that kind of listening mechanism and a constant conversation with employees so that we adapt to what they need is really important.
And Lee, you said what really worries you is uncertainty. We've already had a couple of U-turns in the last couple of days. Are you confident that the government's going to create the certainty, the conditions to incentivise you to invest in your business's human capital?
That's super hard. I honestly, I have to deal with whatever's on the table anyway. So I'll
you only want honesty.
Yeah. I
guess what? So does government.
but I think the real thing is what brought my investors over, right? So that's external foreign investment into the UK, which is what we all want. Was because of the innovation and the tech behind it, right? That was achieved. Pretty much 50% because of UK RI and Innovate UK funding. Now that money, that area would not exist without UK RI funding. So when I look at certainty, I look at certainty in a lot of the grant programs and how much money is going into R&D. That's really important there. Yes, if there's an uncertainty in labour and salaries and working conditions and things like that, it does present problems, but then you're dealing with that to a certain extent. So as long as you don't go anti-competitive compared to like European Union, and you suddenly see the workforce disappear out of the UK, then you have to cope with those changes. So as long as it's not in the extremes, that doesn't tax policy and labour policy is less of a detriment to a scale-up business, because the key driver is that foreign investment coming in because of the groundwork that we laid before. As I get bigger, it's going to start making a bit more difference, especially Amazon size. But right now it's a speed bump, not a roadblock, I would say.
All right. Okay, let's have some questions, Chris.
Okay, I'll have one more go and then you'll be rid of me. What you said there about the critical importance of protecting the most vulnerable and looking at work incentives in a broader sense rather than specific through this sort of measures and freeze is not going to dispel the impression that you're a little bit sceptical about the idea of decreasing benefits below inflation as an easy saving. So do you agree with your colleague Penny Mordaunt, who's out saying this morning, it just makes sense to increase benefits in line with inflation, that government needs to be looking after people, and you can't give with one hand and then take it away with the other?
Chris, I'm dreadfully sorry to disappoint you, but I'm not going to add more to what I've already said on this. It is a very large, very serious, quite complex decision for government. It's one that I'm taking, as I should do, with data that will be coming in shortly, and that needs very careful consideration. The principles that I'm using in my approach to that decision certainly begin with protecting the most vulnerable.
I'm sorry, Chloe, Dan Bloom from The Mirror.
Hello
I'm going to
again.
try one more.
Great.
And then
I'll give you exactly the same answer.
It has been reported that you personally harbour significant reservations about this. You do sound very measured in your language. Are those reports true, and have you raised any concerns behind the scenes about them?
Exactly what I just said over there. I'm sorry, guys. I have now said what I'm going to say on the subject.
It is ironic that the government had so much haste with everything else, but there's so much deliberation on this particular area.
Really, I mean, I've given you, in a couple of different answers there. There isn't more at this stage that I can add. If you perceive me as a measured thinker and speaker, then actually I'm very happy with that, because on behalf of some of the most vulnerable people in our country, that is the right kind of attitude we should be taking.
Good morning, Chloe. I'm not from the media. I'm Andrew Bell from Maximus. And can I just say congratulations on your appointment as Secretary of State. It was really good to hear you in the main hall yesterday setting out your priorities for the department. You mentioned a couple of key statistics at the beginning. I just wanted to table a couple of more. The disability employment gap is currently running at 28%. We know that offenders, around only a quarter of offenders after leaving prison find work. I'm just wondering, that to me seems like a really good opportunity to get those groups back into work, given the numbers that we're looking at. And how important do you think a partnership-based approach is between government, business, public-private and third sectors working together to really give the specialised support that those groups, like ex-offenders, disabled people, need to give them the confidence to get back into the workplace?
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you very much for what your firm does as part of that agenda. You do have a great deal of expertise in the kind of areas you set out there, and I do think that partnership approach is very important. Obviously, my department actually is one of the biggest contracting parties in government, in the sense that actually we use a huge range of partners to be able to achieve what we need to do to support people into work. And the reason why we have a real variety of partners is, of course, because actually people have a real variety of challenges, and people's needs for skills, for supporting services, for shapes and sizes of opportunities, it really spans the range. So you make a very good point about prison leavers. It would obviously be such a dreadful waste of their human potential and opportunity if actually on leaving prison they were condemned to then not being able to make a fresh start and be able to contribute again to society and to work. So we certainly do want to do everything we can in that particular example. I'm really pleased you also mentioned the disability employment gap, because this is a really good emblem actually of how we can try to make a difference. And critically, it's real people behind an emblem, behind a statistic. The statistic is broadly that just under 30% is the size of the disability employment gap in this country. Now that means for those who are not familiar with that means the gap in the rates of employment between disabled people and non-disabled people. In other words, roughly speaking, 80% of non-disabled people are in work and 50% of disabled people are. Very broad view of the statistics there. The disability employment gap, again, broadly is closing, but that is not going fast enough, in my opinion. So one of the things I want to do is to get that moving even faster. We have seen some success in this, in the sense that we had set out a goal to see 1 million more disabled people go into work in 10 years. In fact, this was a manifesto commitment to the last election, at a previous election. And in fact, that target was smashed inside 5 years, which is really great news for those people then who have got that opportunity and everything that they deserve to be able to do, absolutely what they would like to do in life and in work. But also behind that statistic is actually quite a lot of other factors as well, and I think it's fair to say that we also see rising prevalence of disability in society. So there's a lot of factors that go into this. We need to be able to take I'll use the word again, a measured approach, but an optimistic one that says here is something really, really worth doing, and that we use partners in as broad a way as we can to achieve that across the country.
Lee, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, just a little bit about from our position. Obviously, I would class that as same as upskilling on in a lot of areas. So it is that medium-term approach. So how can you train somebody within a year to that's my medium-term, within a year, to scale up as quickly as possible. And yeah, like from all of our onboarding, we don't ask disability status, we don't ask any racial disability, gender status, because it's really around the skill sets that are there. And so naturally we've had quite a diverse business so far, and we want to kind of maintain that as we're growing, and it's really important because yes, this is where the hybrid working kind of a lot of management have calmed down a little bit when it comes to hybrid working in certain circumstances. I am a believer that hybrid working doesn't work for everything, especially in manufacturing. It's like you're never going to be able to do it, but in certain departments, in certain sections, absolutely. The kind of relaxation of those traditional rules around using Skype, using Teams, that sort of thing, has really dropped. On the counter side to that, we were talking a little bit about hybrid working, and there's this broad brush that gets put over everything. I've been very adamant that everyone I hire works in the building, in the office, and it's because it's not just what you can talk about over the internet. It's all the body cues, the things that people don't say, the meetings that people are sitting in and overhear things. There's a lot of that gets missed when compared to an email or anything like that. So in certain scenarios, absolutely, it helps with training up people who are unable to come into the office, but at the same time, to spur growth and to really get the businesses ramping up again, you do need to be in.
Sorry, would you mind if I just respond to something
Yeah, sure.
that Lee's just said there? I wondered if I might just bring in the point about accessibility that I said to Lee I would at this panel, because actually your company, the widgets you produce is actually also critical in this, which is we need the broader environment to be able to be accessible enough for everybody to get involved. Yeah. And I know you're thinking very carefully about how the charging points that your company deals with can be part of that. There is no reason why those bits of infrastructure, or frankly any other bit of infrastructure, should not be accessible from the very outset. So accessibility by design, just throw that concept in there, and I know it's something you're looking at.
Yeah, and As we were discussing earlier, like this is a step in design. It's not, oh, we have to exclude, it's going to cost more money. It's like, no, there just has to be training and thought processes when it comes to that in regards to design language. Now, it does probably add a little bit of cost onto those types of things, because any of that always does. You have to either have your sunk cost of doing the design work, or there's very little incentives for other companies to do this. So there's a bit of carrot and bit of stick when it comes to those challenges. But yeah, like if you actually are good with design work and you are a company, like I'm 35, like when I was doing my training at university, you had to think about disability design work. You had to think about total life cycle work. So one of the stats that's actually kind of surprising as well is that every single electric charger that's installed today will have to be ripped out of the ground by 2030, and none of it gets recycled. So that's surprising, and that loop gets propagated because there's this rapid change to get this stuff out there for mobility and electrification in the world. But people jump steps, they skip steps to deliver that stuff. So things that are being installed today won't have disability requirements built in. They're not designed to last long.
And Monica, we've kind of acknowledged that not every job can be hybrid, not every job can be done from home. But one of the concerns about hybrid working is that there'd be this two-track workforce. It's something that was raised by Catherine Mann, one of the Bank of England Monetary Policy Committee members. Do you find, perhaps on the corporate side, that it tends to be men who are coming into the office and women staying at home because they tend to be the primary caregivers? Not being sexist tends to be the fact in the research.
Yeah, we've thought very carefully about hybrids, and as a company we've actually changed during the pandemic. Initially, there was a sort of kind of back to the office and trying to kind of choreograph it a bit more. Where we are at the moment is giving individual teams flexibility to decide what works for them best in the kind of corporate space, because some teams need to be together all the time or less often, and others maybe not so much. We have a very kind of varied workforce. We have a lot of young people in corporate as well as others, so not everybody has children, and I don't know that I would subscribe to kind of the women are staying home and the men are coming in as much, but maybe that's just anecdotal observation. What we're trying to do is make sure that the office is the right space for people to work, and that there are good reasons to come in, and that we incentivize people coming in, but also that when people don't want or don't need to come in, they can also kind of do the work in other ways. So it's really kind of listening to that constant feedback that we're getting. I mean, when I say that we listen to feedback, we get a question every day through a system that we call Connections. It's a tool, and the question pops up in your screen and you need to answer, and often the questions are around kind of, at the moment, when do you want to come in, when not, and I think we get 1.2 million kind of answers every day. The question I got today was how satisfied I am with my job. I said I'm satisfied with my job, but I think that's where we're getting, and I think we need to look into that. But to pick up on something that you were saying about upskilling and in the office or not, apprentices, for instance, is something that I think it's a really important part of the discussion about training and retraining. We have a lot of apprentices in our operations and in our corporate roles, and as I said, across 40 different schemes, so really different creative industries, sustainability, thinking about the future, and kind of IT and administration and HR, and for those, being in the office and being with other cohorts of apprentices is really, really important, but they can't be there if their managers aren't there. So there is that element of kind of learning from your peers and your seniors, a bit by osmosis, and picking up cues, and I think from a development perspective and a career progression perspective, that is something that is important, rather than the immediate needs that you might have on the day. Everyone has an emergency sometimes, but I think the structure needs to be such that allows for that human interaction.
Are there any other questions?
Oh, wow.
Jane McGowan from the Centre for Ageing Better. Really encouraging to hear your comments on older workers. So we run a series of pilot projects to improve employment support. And to try and encourage over 50s to get back into the labour market. And we know that flexible working is one of the things that is most valued by older workers. It's the #1 thing. there's been a lot of conversation about it already, but I wondered about the government's plans around carers leave to bring forward 5 days of unpaid carers leave, as in the 2019 manifesto.
Yeah, really important topic. And by the way, let's have a longer conversation offline about the ways in which we can support older people in terms of work. Yes, I believe the next step on the carers leave point is actually a private members bill that is coming forward that will be able to legislate in that space. So I think it's the case that we're on track to see those reforms come through, and I think they're really important. Actually, I do speak quite a lot to carers and carers groups in the context of the carers benefits that I also look after at the department, and I know how important that one is.
I think I'm the only pensioner present, and just want to feed in 3 very quick points for consideration on employability. My experience job hunting at the age of 59, almost impossible to get an interview. I've got a broad spread of skills and experience, which included spotting the misprint on figure 15 in the booklet in those blue bags. And I was reading it last night, and that's one of the issues. And now my lifestyle is adjusted to living on about 7,000 or 8,000 a year pension, plus my wife's pension, and to get back into any paid employment would actually be now for me quite a big job, even though I've got skills that could contribute. Second, the unseen disability is autism, and statistically autistic people have great difficulty in holding down a job. I know this from a family member, and this is another area where adjustments need to be made, and a lot of companies don't understand, for example, that somebody working in IT is very happy in a back room, doesn't like meeting customers face to face, for example, or picking up the telephone, for example. So there's another issue of employability that needs addressing. And thirdly, somebody here mentioned about ex-offenders. Statistically, a lot of people in prison cannot read and write. So if you want to get them back into employment, you've got to send tutors into the prisons to deal with the literacy issue, and then that makes them employable when they come out.
I think it'd be good to hear Chloe's perspective, but also what Amazon's doing about those things.
My perspective is a yes. You make really good points, and I actually agree with all of them. So.
Thank you.
I agree, and I think we could do more. In some of the points you've mentioned at the moment, we don't have a prison leavers program, something we are discussing, but those are really good points. And I think the point you make about beefing up pre-employability skills, I mean, it is read and write, but it's also some other basic literacy skills. And we've been calling for apprenticeship levy reform for a while, in various ways. We think that there's a need for more flexibility, kind of expanding the length of time that you may use it, but also using some of the levy to support people that want to apply for an apprenticeship but actually don't have the necessary skills to even go and apply for apprenticeships. And there's some that we've had to turn away because they didn't have that. I think, well, you could use some of the levy to kind of beef up the pipeline for apprenticeships. And then SMEs, I mean, we haven't talked much about small businesses. You've mentioned us as a big business, which of course we are, but we are also a marketplace, and 85,000 small businesses sell through our marketplace, and we transfer part of our apprenticeship levy to them. But one of the problems they face is they don't have enough resources to kind of administer the levy or the apprenticeships or some of the training programs. So kind of training, supporting the training, upskilling, and the route to employment via SMEs is also really, really important, and something we're looking into as well.
If I can just make a supplementary, I think my volunteer time a week is probably worth something like £10,000 or £15,000 a year.
Right.
But that is very flexible input, including last year I was helping teach English to immigrants in a totally volunteer capacity, 3 days a week, and that kind of thing. So how to use the pensioner workforce in a flexible way that fits our lifestyle is another another of these issues to take on board, please.
And might actually help with fixing the inactivity issues that we've got.
Yeah, I've got a tiny little bit to add to this. So I'm from in a scale-up area. Like one of the big challenges, I think you mentioned it just, was the overhead, right? So when we're applying for grants, when we're applying for any programs, like I have to hire people to manage those programs. That is a massive amount of overtime. It's a sunk cost that you don't see for a year. Like it can really kind of build up. So you have to pick your battles when it comes to that. Now, one of the biggest things, the Gov UK website, that started to help collate things together. So you had a central repository for stuff, but there's still no location. So for example, if I wanted to, I didn't even know there was any sort of ex-offenders programs, for example, or anything like that. You don't get that information. You don't have a one-stop shop where I could phone up as a business and go, I need what's available for me. And like, I'm more than happy to bring everything to the table and go, okay, well, what's my medium-term goal? How do I upskill these people? I believe the only time I heard about all the advantages of the Kickstarter program, obviously that was the program that came out of the COVID crisis, was because it was pretty much put on my desk by one of our investors and said, this is everything. And they had to coordinate that with multiple businesses to be able to access that grant because there was limits on the size, and the administration behind that was crazy.
Yeah.
And so I'm fine with red tape, I'm fine with processes and controls. It's not removing, it's simplifying it and greater access to it.
Yeah.
So I've got one number I can phone up for the West Midlands or anything like that, whether it's even through the job centre. And obviously small and medium businesses are a big chunk of the economy. And so if I'm not being able to have my spare capacity to deal with that, because I don't have a department to lean on, then where do I start?
And I couldn't agree more. And we hear that all the time from small businesses, and we're very happy to either administer for clusters of SMEs apprenticeships for instance, and take that overhead away, or transfer more of the levy, but we can't. So, but you know, because the way the levy is set up doesn't allow us to, so we're not kind of spending all that money. That's exactly what some of the SMEs say, I'd love an apprentice, but I can't deal with the extra cost. They don't go for it.
So there's a real thing here for me to respond to actually, and I can give you the reassurance that we are already looking at some of these points around the levy. So it's very welcome that you give that those examples here today. But the additional thing to make sure you're aware of is actually how our job centres could potentially fulfil that one-stop shop desire for you. So we have a team that looks after partnerships with both national employers. So, for example, Amazon, I'm really hoping you're on the list of that. You would be the perfect illustration of an employer where that must be so, because obviously we then want to be able to work with you to get people into your roles across the entire country. But coming down the scale to more medium-sized or smaller employers, the same is absolutely true. So let me take that one away and actively make that link, and indeed for any other employer that is here listening in the room as well, because that's how we do it. So we do have the ability to make sure you get that information, and it's a kind of an ongoing battle, isn't it, to help every new business understand what's out there. So we do aim to do that.
So we've only got a couple of minutes left. Let's squeeze in one last question.
I represent a group of small businesses, and we used the Help to Grow training for one of our managers, and it was absolutely excellent. But the uptake wasn't that great. I mean, she went on a course, but there were a limited number of people actually on the course, and I think part of that was that it was difficult to find. I mean, we had to really look for it when we heard, because it was in the national press. But as I said, getting that out there and letting people understand. People, and then basically getting the feedback, because if it was anything else on social media, everybody would be shouting about this brilliant scheme and everybody did it, but that's not the sort of thing you do with a government training course. But
make it sexy and flowy.
There we go, that's the job. Thank you very much. I'm glad that worked for you.
Okay, well, I'm glad that we've managed to have such a productive, broad discussion, even if there was one thing that the media perhaps wanted to focus on today and get so many perspectives from businesses, big and small, and personal experiences as well. So thank you all for joining, and thank you all for being on the panel.
Thank you.